It was Monday, November the 4th, 2013, 2 days before my mum's birthday and 3 days before my birthday. My birthday is on November the 7th and my mum's birthday is on November the 6th. And I remember the day just like it was yesterday. I was in the office in Sydney. I used to work for a bank in their headquarters, and I got a phone call from my brother. Dad's had a heart attack, he said. And I was shocked. I froze. Probably for about 30 seconds, maybe up to a minute. And my dad, he had a bypass maybe 10, 15 years ago from that time, but he had never quit smoking. So I knew he had a heart problem and he was always on medication. He used to take this spray, I can't remember the name of it, to manage his angina. He used to get pains all the time. And my brother also used to work in Sydney as well. We didn't work too far from each other, so I said, look, let's get down there straight away. Let's get to the hospital. And my parents, they used to live in a place called Wollongong, which was around about 85 kilometres from Sydney. It's also where I used to live as well. And I told my work colleagues that, look, my dad's had a heart attack. I just had a phone call from my brother. I've got to go. It's an emergency. And they were all shocked as well. They couldn't believe it. And they all knew how close I was to my father. And anyway, so I told my brother to meet me at the car park. I used to park at the Opera House. And it was about 15 minutes walk from where I was. The bank was actually in a place called Circular Quay. It's right on the harbour there. And the Opera House is not far from the harbour if you know where the harbour is. And so it was only a 15-minute walk. So as I walked, I was really worried. I was, wondering how that would have felt for him. And I just wanted him to be well. I just, was hoping that he wasn't going to be in too much pain. And I was thinking, how did this happen and what sort of state he would be in. And I told my brother before I left, meet me at the car park and I'll ring you a bit later on. And in the meantime, ring the hospital, to see how he's doing. And I'll call you a little bit later on. So I got to the car park. It was underground. So just before I actually went underground, I knew there wasn't going to be any service there for my mobile phone. So I thought I'd ring him. And I gave him a call and I asked him, I said, look, have you rung the hospital? How is he? And he said, yeah, I did ring the hospital. And I said, yeah, how's the situation? What's the status? And he said, yeah, look, they've told me that he's passed away. And I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe that he has gone. I still remember the day right now, the phone call, the discussion that I had with my brother. And I couldn't believe that the hospital actually told him over the phone. And I also couldn't believe that that's actually how I found out. And surprisingly, I was still very composed. I said to my brother, look, let's get down there straight away. How far are you? And he was only a few minutes away. So I asked him where he was and I said, look, let me drive up to where you are. He wasn't very far from the car park. He was walking down. And I said, look, I'll pick you up and we'll head off to the freeway. And, Wollongong was about 85 kilometres from where we were. And I remember driving back home. And I've made this trip from Wollongong to Sydney over the last 15 years. I'd always worked in Sydney for many different companies. And that trip normally would take me around about an hour and 15 minutes. Absolutely, at the most, no more than an hour and a half when it was really busy. And on this particular day, as I was driving back, I remember it took me over 2 hours, probably around 2.5 hours. And I couldn't believe it. I remember now that I was actually making all these wrong turns and I couldn't find my way back home. My mind was absolutely not in the right state, and I can obviously understand that now, which is why I just couldn't believe why the hospital actually chose to tell us over the phone about my dad passing away on this particular day. And so, we got home and, we dealt with that, and it went on for a few weeks. And obviously something that we'll never forget. I even now, it's many years have passed and I'll still remember that day. I always think about him. And anyway, So we sort of, that happened. We went through a lot over the last couple of years, and we're still trying to deal with it. I don't think that's something you ever forget. And especially with me, I was very close to my dad. And only a couple of months ago, at the age of 40, I actually had a heart attack. And I was absolutely shocked at what had happened to me. Number one, I actually didn't even feel it. And I was absolutely shocked when the hospital actually told me that, look, you've actually had a heart attack, because I actually couldn't believe it. I didn't feel anything. I didn't even know that I had a heart attack. All I knew at the time was that something was wrong. I could feel a bit of pain in my back. I could feel my left hands. It was sort of, my fingers were tingly. They were going a bit numb. My my jaw, I could feel a bit of pain in my jaw on the sort of left hand side of my jaw towards the neck. And after I found out that everyone has a different experience when they actually go through a heart attack, but I actually didn't feel a lot of pain. I was actually shocked, completely shocked, when the hospital, when the actual chief surgeon there who came to actually diagnose me said to me that you've actually had a heart attack. And I was in denial. I actually didn't believe him. I said, no, look, I didn't feel any pain. I didn't, I didn't have a heart attack. No way. Are you sure? And I actually was sort of arguing with him because I actually wanted to go home. I was in denial, and he said, look, no, you've had a heart attack. We've done some checks. We've got the indicators, and we can see at least 4 or 5 different indicators that have confirmed to us that you've actually had a heart attack. And he was referring to a specific indicator which they actually find in your blood when your heart muscle actually gets damaged, and that happens after you've had a heart attack. And he told me, look, I've confirmed with your blood test that we have seen this in your blood, and that confirms to us that you actually have had a heart attack. And the fact that, your father had a heart attack and he passed away from a heart attack, and your age, and I was a bit obese as well at the time, also confirmed your risks. And so I was absolutely shocked. And then came the next piece of information and news, was that I actually had to stay in hospital, and they actually had to operate on me because they needed to check to see why I had the heart attack. And basically they found out that some of my arteries were blocked, so I had to actually get what's called a stent put in. But while I was in hospital, they did a whole bunch of other tests, and they actually found out that I was also a diabetic. And I absolutely just couldn't believe it, because I had no symptoms of being a diabetic. Like I had, I had no known symptoms of being a diabetic. But now that I've done more research, and now that I know more about diabetes, I now know and recognize all of the things that I went through over my life, to know that, yeah, look, I am a diabetic. But what's amazing is I've actually almost completely recovered from my heart operation and my issues with diabetes, and as well as my weight gain as well. I'm now 20 kilos lighter, and all of this has only happened in the last 6 months. I had my heart attack in October of last year, and the last 6 months I've completely changed my lifestyle. I do more exercise. I eat a lot better. I still enjoy food. I still actually eat out every day for lunch. So I still enjoy food, but I've lost 20 kilos. I've completely reduced my issues with sugar. I have completely reduced my cholesterol level. In fact, I had a blood test recently, because at the time when I was in hospital, my sugar levels were sky high, my blood pressure was sky high, my cholesterol was sky high, and so many issues. Obviously, my weight was also very, very high, in the obese category. And in the last 6 months, I've completely reduced my weight. I'm now 20 kilos light. I've still got a bit to go. My sugar levels are back to normal. My cholesterol levels are back to normal. My blood pressure is absolutely back to normal. And my doctors, especially when I got my cholesterol report back, he was asking me, he was actually the surgeon who put in my stent. I go back to him every few months. And I had my 3-monthly checkup, and he was asking me, how did you get your cholesterol down to so low? I mean, it's actually lower than normal now. And he was absolutely amazed. So in this video, I just wanted to make you aware of at least 10 symptoms of diabetes that most people ignore. And the first one is actually excessive thirst. And now that I have learnt about some of these symptoms, I actually can remember that, yeah, I actually was very thirsty all the time. And, I just used to drink water. I didn't care. I just thought, yeah, look, I guess my body needs water. I actually, put it to, look, I'm probably not eating food that is nutritious enough, and that's why my body's always wanting more water. I'm probably not, exercising enough. And I didn't really know that excessive thirst is in fact a symptom of being a diabetic. And constant and excessive thirst is one of the most common symptoms of diabetes. I found this out later. And many people tend to ignore this, just like I did, by assuming they just need to drink more water throughout the day. And that's exactly what I used to think, when in reality, it's actually your body telling you something is wrong and your blood sugar is just way too high. Over time, having high blood sugar can lead to severe damage to some of your vital organs, like your kidneys. I actually also have, kidney issues is also something that's hereditary in my family. My grandma used to be on dialysis, and my cousin, who's actually only in his 20s, is actually on dialysis right now. So that's actually something that's an issue in my family as well. And so, you want to be sure to listen to your body and tell your doctor if you're experiencing excessive thirst. I mean, I couldn't believe that these are some of the things that are symptoms of being a diabetic. Having excessive, having, a thirst for excessive water, I thought that's just normal. So, the other one that is something that a lot of people ignore is blurred vision. One would not even think to acquaint this to being a diabetic. Untreated diabetes can cause severe blurriness and loss of vision. Now, I actually don't even know how long I had diabetes, before I actually was diagnosed with it. And when I actually spoke to the nurse who came and told me that, look, your blood tests reveal that you have a lot of sugar in your blood, and that means you're actually a diabetic. She actually told me that, look, a lot of people actually don't know that they are a diabetic, just like I didn't know. So it's very, very common. Now, luckily for me, I actually didn't suffer from blurred vision. But if left untreated, diabetes can cause you to have cataracts, diabetic retinopathy, glaucoma, and eventually complete blindness. It is very important to pay attention and alert your doctor if you experience any blurriness or change in vision. Severe pressure can also be linked to high blood pressure, so don't hesitate to contact your eye doctor even between scheduled visits. So I was actually amazed that because when my nurse was actually talking to me about, have you had these symptoms, these are the things that she actually asked me about, and I was surprised that these are all sort of connected with being a diabetic. I didn't have all these things, but everybody's different, So you want to be aware of these, because diabetes is actually known as the silent killer, especially for what it has, what it does to your heart nerves, because it actually does something to your nerves where you actually don't feel pain, which is why I didn't feel my heart attack pain. So imagine if I didn't actually go to the hospital and sort of ignored that pain, I would have had a bigger heart attack, if it was left untreated, if I actually didn't widen my arteries and get that stent put in. Because of my diabetic situation, I would have not felt the pain, and I could have actually had a bigger heart attack. That's why you really want to make sure you are aware of what these symptoms are, because it's just so common these days. Diabetes is just everywhere. Everyone almost that I talk with knows someone or has diabetes. So you really want to be aware of some of these symptoms. Yeast infections is another symptom. If you are aware you have diabetes type 2, then you are probably aware of the common occurrence of the irritating yeast infection. Now, again, I'm lucky enough not to have had to go through this, but for women who have untreated diabetes, it can be a bit of an unexpected and unwanted surprise. Doctors aren't exactly sure why women with type 2 diabetes have some yeast infections, but they are sure that there is a direct correlation between high blood sugar and increased yeast bacteria in the vagina. If you are experiencing yeast infections more frequently than usual, contact your doctor to get tested. Obviously that's not something that I had to worry myself about, but it's just amazing that things that you just would never expect to be directly connected with diabetes are just so common. And this is just the amazing thing, that we just don't know that these symptoms relate to such a serious disease that must be treated in time before it actually gets worse. I mean, I couldn't believe that you could actually lose your limbs if you didn't treat your diabetes in time. I mean, that is just horrific. Wounds that won't heal, that's another symptom of being a diabetic. Poor circulation is one of the most serious side effects of diabetes. Poor circulation can cut off blood flow, causing your wounds not to get the necessary blood cells to heal. Over time, poor circulation can lead to irreversible nerve damage. And this is, I think, why I didn't feel my heart attack, because of my nerve damage. So looks like my diabetes actually was at a certain level where it actually did destroy some of my nerves, because I definitely didn't feel my heart attack. So that, was a sort of level where my diabetes got to before I was lucky enough to actually be diagnosed with it, and then now lucky enough to be actually treated. If you start to notice that any scratches or scrapes are taking longer than usual to heal, consider contacting your doctor to get more information about blood flow and diabetes. And I think people should just very regularly just have blood tests, and when your doctor asks you, what do you want to get tested for? I would test for everything. You want to get tested for your kidneys, you want to get tested for your blood sugars, for blood pressure, all those sort of things. And as a male, I actually have some people in my family who have had issues with their prostate. So, when I go to do my blood test, I also make sure, I think it's called PS1, to have that included in my tests, because these days you just don't know, with all the different foods that we now eat, we're just not eating all the natural fruits and veggies anymore, and all of our foods are now processed. There are just so many more issues with the foods that we're now eating. We just have to get more tests done so that we become aware of what our bodies may be going through and what sort of issues we might have that are unnoticed. Okay, so it's just becoming more and more important. Changes in your skin is another symptom of a potential diabetic. Having diabetes can have some pretty irritating skin conditions if left untreated or poorly managed. Now, I actually have very dry skin, and this is something that my doctor or my nurse, when she was talking to me about diabetes, also asked me about, and I said, yeah, look, I get very dry skin. I'm always scratching myself because I'm always very itchy and my skin is always very dry. And she explained that this is a very, key symptom of a diabetic. So this is another one that you really want to be aware of and get it checked out if you have dry skin or you're very itchy, and it's obviously irritating as well. High blood sugar not only has negative effects on your internal organs, but your skin too. Yeast infections and poor circulation can both cause itching and irritated skin. Fungal infections are also more common with people who have diabetes and should be taken seriously. Poor circulation over time can actually change the appearance of your skin, affecting not only its ability to heal properly, but its texture and color as well. So like I said, I actually have very dry skin. I've always had dry skin, and I was just thought, well, it's because I, have a lot of hot showers now. Maybe that's true. Maybe that's the cause of it, but it was actually linked directly to my problem with my blood sugar levels. Okay, so if you've got, irritating, itchy skin or dry skin, you want to get it checked out. I mean, maybe it's not an issue for you as a diabetic, but, at least get it checked out, because you want to get your diabetes treated Okay. Now, these are very common symptoms. When you think about these symptoms, they're very common. I'm sure you know friends or family or even maybe yourself that actually may have gone through some of these symptoms, but surprisingly, it can be much more serious, like being a diabetic that you must take care of and, at least get treated. Okay, swelling in the hands and feet. This is another very common symptom of being a diabetic, and I was lucky I actually didn't suffer from this symptom, but it's very, very common. Kidney malfunctions are common in people with untreated or poorly controlled diabetes, and is common, and it comes with some annoying and serious side effects. Swelling in the hands, feet, ankles, and face can be an indication that your kidneys aren't working properly and excess liquid is building up. I remember actually when I was in hospital, there was a guy that came in and he couldn't breathe properly, and I really felt bad for him because as I slept there, I could actually hear him struggling to breathe, and he couldn't sleep all night. And I asked him, what's happened to you? And actually what had happened to him was he actually was suffering from some kidney damage, but he wasn't on dialysis at the moment. He was just too scared, and he was just fearful of going on dialysis. And he was told early on that, look, you can only consume, I think it was 1 liter of water per day. And that for him included all the food, like if he ate a tomato, that any water in that tomato was also counted as part of his 1 liter. And he ignored a lot of that advice, and he continued to drink soda and water, and eventually it actually built up in his lungs, and that's why he couldn't breathe, and he had to come into hospital, and they actually had to drain him from that excess water, and they actually just gave him an injection, and he had this thing, some fluid that was going into his body full time while he was there in hospital, and it actually made him urinate a lot, and that's how they actually got rid of a lot of his fluid, his excess fluid. But this can also be related to high blood sugar levels, which gives you, relates to high blood pressure and, kidney failure, and therefore, creates excess fluid in your body, and therefore your body starts to swell up. So all these things are related. You want to get these things checked out early as possible, as soon as you identify some of these symptoms, okay? Because they could be very serious. In fact, I remember when I was in hospital, there was a guy who came in, he was on a holiday, and his stomach had swollen up, and he came in to get his heart checked because they thought there was something wrong with the pumping of his heart, and therefore, his heart and his body wasn't functioning properly, and they thought that's why he was having all this excess fluid in his stomach. And actually turned out to be nothing related to his heart. It wasn't diabetes or anything like that. It wasn't kidney failure or anything like that. It actually just turned out to be some sort of bug, some sort of virus that he had actually contained by eating something overseas. So at least he came in and got it checked out. I mean, he was frightened, just like I was when I was in hospital. And he was, fearful that it was his heart or his kidneys or, something else like diabetes. So you want to get all these things checked out as soon as you, become aware of some of these issues. But as I said, some of these symptoms are, people just think they are common. You don't pay close attention to them. You think, well, that's just normal, it'll just pass. But you really want to make sure that you actually get these things looked at, because you just don't know how serious it could be, especially with the fact that a lot of these are symptoms that can be directly related to something as serious as diabetes. Okay, so it's very, very important that you do go and get yourself checked out as soon as you identify one of these symptoms. So when waste isn't cleared from your body like it should be, it can start to poison you. Blood sugar and pressure should be controlled to ensure these life-threatening malfunctions don't happen to you. Okay, it's very, very important. Loss of feeling in your limbs. Obviously, this is a very serious one. Another severe complication from untreated diabetes is loss of feeling in your limbs and nerve damage from poor circulation. Like I said, I think I've damaged some of my nerves because I didn't feel my heart attack. Not only does poor circulation have effects on your skin, but also with it causing the loss of feeling, it leaves you vulnerable to unnoticed injury. Cuts and scrapes that are untreated can get infected and lead to more serious infections. Okay, so obviously, if you're having issues with feeling your limbs, you want to get that checked out straight away. Another very critical symptom that goes unnoticed and is directly related to diabetes is a sudden change in weight. So, contrary to popular belief, diabetes and rapid weight loss can be connected. If you experience rapid weight loss, it can be due to diabetes not allowing the sugar to enter your cells, leaving you feeling excessively hungry and thirsty. However, rapid weight gain is also a common occurrence with people who have diabetes for multiple reasons. If you have unusual weight gain, it can be an indication of type 1 diabetes, and being overweight can cause type 2 diabetes. So weight loss and weight gain is something that can be attributed to diabetes. Another common symptom is dizziness or confusion. Low blood pressure can cause you to feel confused and dizzy. And if it drops too low, it can be dangerous. When your blood pressure gets too low, you can pass out, leaving you vulnerable to injury from the fall. Symptoms for low blood pressure can be described as feeling anxious or nervous, as well as the usual hunger pains. Always keep a snack handy, as when you're having a low blood pressure episode, you can correct it as quickly as possible. In fact, I remember when I was in hospital and I had high blood pressure. And it wasn't because I was in hospital, but I was suffering from high blood pressure. So my symptoms were all sort of combined. I had high blood sugar levels, I had high blood pressure, I had high cholesterol, and I was obese as well. So all these things combined, the doctors were actually quite worried. But therefore they put me on some tablets to actually lower my blood pressure, because high blood pressure is actually dangerous for your kidneys. Now, they actually put me on some really strong medication, because when I actually went in there, I had all these things wrong with me. So they actually thought this guy needs all this medication. But obviously, they monitored it and they made some adjustments later. But when I was started on these medications that I never had ever before, because I've never was aware of being sick like this. So I never had any type of medication. And they actually made me my blood pressure actually went way too low, and I started to feel really weak and started to feel really dizzy. And when they came back, I didn't tell them, but when they came back, they did my blood pressure, they checked it, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Khan, how do you feel? Your blood pressure is really low." And I told them, "Yeah, look, I don't feel right." And so what the nurse did actually was, he said, "Look, take a few glasses of water." So not only is it handy to have a few snacks with you if you suffer from blood pressure issues, but taking some water can actually slightly raise your blood pressure as well if you find that your blood pressure is too low. Okay, but these things you need to really talk to your doctor about. I'm no doctor. I'm not a medical specialist. I'm just talking to you about my experience, what I've actually learned with my own research and my own experiences having gone through some of this stuff. Another very critical symptom that also goes unnoticed when it comes to diabetes is actually fatigue. Fatigue is a very common symptom that is hard to recognize because of how busy our everyday lives have become. I used to feel very tired all the time, and I always used to think it was because I didn't sleep a lot. This was another problem that I've now rectified, and the fact that I actually didn't sleep much at all. I used to sleep very late at night, maybe 2 o'clock in the morning or 2:30, 3 o'clock in the morning, and I used to wake up very early, like about 6 a.m., 7 a.m. So I was only getting like 3 or 4 hours of sleep each night. And I used to think that my fatigue was just because of my lack of sleep. Now, it may be related to that, but it was actually more related to the fact that I was a diabetic. And so, fatigue is actually caused by diabetes, and it's actually very serious because of the effects it has on your energy levels and the ability for your cells to absorb the glucose. When your body doesn't produce insulin or rejects the insulin you produce, as is the case with diabetics, your cells are starved of glucose and your energy levels can get dangerously low. So you need to listen to your body And you need to listen to your body and understand that it's trying to tell you something. So anyway, I hope you've learned something, and you've learned why they call diabetes the silent killer. And if you want to learn some more, click on the button below to watch the next video.